What's happening, guys? Welcome to another episode of Quarantine Convos. This one's a cool one, and this one I like to tell because I think it's an interesting story. And people that didn't know me from a young age, this might come as a very much surprise. So, the question that was asked, that was submitted, was how I got into bodybuilding. What kind of sparked my interest in bodybuilding and physique development and all that kind of stuff. So, I'll give you a little bit of background information on kind of like my upbringing. My family was never overly into like physical activity. Like my parents weren't into bodybuilding by no means. Didn't know anything about bodybuilding at all outside of probably like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I wasn't really involved in sports really at a young age. They didn't like force me to play like every different sport. They didn't like watch sports on TV. Like it was very like different than I think a lot of people are used to, especially here in Canada where like hockey is so big and that kind of stuff. That wasn't my household at all. But the one thing my family was quite into was professional wrestling. So when I grew up, that's what I saw. I saw professional wrestling on TV. When my buddies would come over, we'd like beat each other up on the couch, and we got a little bit older, we got a trampoline, we'd throw each other around on the trampoline, and when there'd be like big wrestling events on TV, we would get a group of us and we'd all watch it, and we'd, like I said, beat each other up and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that I can look back on was that the wrestlers that I looked up to the most, for the most part, were the ones that were pretty well developed physically. So for any of you guys that know wrestling, names like John Cena, Triple H, Batista, like all these guys were freaking jacked. So those were the wrestlers that I like looked up to from a young age. So I think that the idea of like muscles was imprinted on me when I was really young. And it wasn't like, I don't know, like I think just at a young age, I was probably looking at those people and be like, wow, like I want to look like that, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know that that's what I was thinking at the time, but when I was like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and looking at those people, it was probably, just put in me without me even knowing it. So then as I got older, still grew up, like watching wrestling and all that kind of stuff, but then I got to learn a little bit more about these guys, and a lot of them did come from like a bodybuilding background. John Cena competed in bodybuilding, Triple H competed in bodybuilding, so that's probably where my first kind of memories of bodybuilding started to come into play. And then I remember going to like Walmart to get groceries with my mom, and going to like the magazine racks and seeing like the wrestling magazines, but then probably beside them was like the bodybuilding magazines. So then that's when I probably started to look at that. And I remember there was very rarely a time that my mom could go get groceries with me that I couldn't con her into getting me, whether it was Muscle and Fitness or Muscle Mag or Flex Magazine, and I would take those home and I would read them cover to cover, and I had stacks and stacks and stacks of these magazines, and I would cut out articles and I would read them and like sticky note them and all this kind of stuff. So even when I was like a very early teenager, I was really starting to get into the whole bodybuilding side of things, and still kind of paralleling my love for wrestling, but then now starting to get into bodybuilding, and then myself wanting to start improving my physique and developing my body. I started to research how to train and just kind of get an understanding. So at the time, it wasn't Instagram, it wasn't really YouTube all that much. You learned from the magazines. You learned from bodybuilding.com, which was still is probably the biggest bodybuilding website, but that was where you got a lot of information. And people would publish articles, and they would post like Kai Green's back workout or Arnold Schwarzenegger's chest workout or whatever. So that's where I started to learn some stuff. And my first memories of actually like training, I did P90X, which a lot of you people, if you're kind of my age, maybe a little bit older, will know what P90X is. It was this kind of DVD series that you could get. I think there was like 6 or 7 discs, and it was split up into like muscle groups. So each day was a different workout. So like one day was legs, one day was like back and biceps, chest and shoulders. There was like a killer core workout, which was like unreal. So I got into that because I was like, okay, like this Tony Horton, I think that was his name, yeah, Tony Horton, was the guy that did it, and he was pretty built, and I was like, okay, like he probably knows what he was doing. And I had these adjustable dumbbells, and I had plates similar to what I have here in the house right now for these quarantine workouts, and I had the handles on the dumbbell that you could put the plates on and twist it so you could make, you know, whatever weight you needed. I think I had probably up to like 40 pounds for dumbbells, which at the time was more than enough for most exercises. I had a doorway chin-up bar that I could do chin-ups with and then take it off and do like push-up, various push-ups with. I had an ab wheel. I was religious with the ab wheel. So, you know, when I was like 12 or 13, I was doing that stuff in my bedroom. I'd put the DVD on like every night after school, and I would do that workout for like an hour, and then, you know, go downstairs and eat dinner and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of like the initial phase of it all, and I think my parents really started to see how much I loved it, how much effort I was putting into it, how seriously I was taking it. Like, I kid you not, guys, I was working out. I did that workout thing every single day. You know, they'd see me in my room doing push-ups and chin-ups, just going back and forth, doing sit-ups, because that was all I really knew at the time. And like, even when I was younger, I was getting like a decent physique on me. So then for my 16th birthday, they got me 3 months with a personal trainer, which I think was probably the smartest thing they'd ever done for me, because I met someone really cool, someone who became a good friend. He taught me a lot. Brad Brooks was his name. He was a champion boxer, actually, but you know, for the size that he was, he had a great physique on him. And he was the one that really started to teach me a little bit more about training. So I would see him, I think it was 3 times a week. I would see him for an hour, so it was probably like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I'd go to the gym, and a lot of times it was just me and him in there, so I could pick his brain and ask him all this kind of stuff. And, you know, how do I get bigger? And he started to talk to me about nutrition, and talk to me about food, and eating more protein, and eating, you know, more smaller meals throughout the day. And again, this is when I'm like 16 years old. I'm still like very young. And I made some awesome progress. Like the whole like newbie gains, like that was fast tracked even more because I had someone helping me along the way. I had a coach before having a coach was normal, right? So I did that with him for the 3 months, and like I said, learned a lot, and will be forever grateful for what he taught me. And then I would have been in high school, so I started training in the weight room. But then at the time, a friend of mine who was like a brother to me, he lived just another street over, and I grew up out in the country, so you could just like bike to each other's houses, and you know, you wouldn't have to worry about getting hit by cars or anything like that, because it was pretty quiet. And we took over my dad's garage and turned it into a gym. And throughout this video, I've probably been throwing up photos where I can, and I know that there's photos of this little gym that I can pop up right now. And we literally took it over, so it was like his little tool shed, because he was a carpenter. We kind of kicked him out, and we had like this like 2-room garage basically. One room was like a machine room, you could say. One room was like more free weights. And we'd go in there every night after school, whether it was like the middle of the summer and it was blazing hot, or if it was the dead of winter and it was freezing cold. We had speakers up there so we could play some music and just do our thing. And me and him, he also was a fan of wrestling, so we'd been very much like brothers for years and years and years. And that just kind of transitioned to our love to the weight room, and we'd go out there and we'd do our thing, and we'd lift every night. We'd be out there for hours, and then we'd come in and have dinner, or whether it was after dinner or whatever, and we just loved it. And you know, we didn't necessarily probably know what we were doing perfectly, but that's something that I think a lot of people get kind of paralyzed by now, is trying to find the perfect program, the perfect number of sets to do, number of reps, and you know, perfect progressions and all this kind of stuff. Back then, that wasn't a thing. You just went in there and you lifted, and you know, if I did 100 pounds last week, I'm going to try to do 105 pounds this week, or whatever it was. You just tried to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And we had a good setup. We had this universal machine that had like 4 or 5 different like ends on it. It had like a leg press, I remember. It had a pull down, I think it had a pec deck, which I had bought from a gym that I was working at. I cleaned after hours at this gym, and they had this machine in a back room that was never used. So I just one day was like, hey, like, can I buy this? And they're like, yeah, if you can get it off our hands, actually, we'll give it to you cheap, because it was just taking up space and it was a pain in the ass to move. But I wanted it, so my dad and I went in there and we snagged it up and built it, and it was great. We had a squat rack in the gym. We had a bench. I had those adjustable dumbbells that went up to 90 pounds. So for us, like, very little could we do 90 pounds with. So those weights were more than enough. And man, we loved it. We had a great time. So that was like, you know, my high school years. And then as I got into college, that's when I started, you know, continuing to take it more and more seriously and learning more about kind of the sport of bodybuilding. And that was when social media started to pick up. So you started following bodybuilders like through Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and, you know, guys like Phil Heath. I was into Fouad Abiad's a Canadian bodybuilder. He actually did a seminar in my hometown one time, and of course I had to be there. And that was one of my first real recollections of like bodybuilding, right? And, you know, just learning from him and following him. Started going to expos, the Toronto Pro Expo every year. And then when I was like 19, 20, I probably started to get the idea of like maybe I could do a show. Again, like doing a show wasn't popular. I couldn't name 30 people that I knew that did shows like I can nowadays. Like, you did a show, you were like the only person in town that did this whole bodybuilding thing, right? So I went back and forth on it for a good chunk of time. Like I would start to like diet, and this was, again, like I didn't know outside of like that personal trainer that I had when I was 16. I didn't know about like bodybuilding coaches, right? So I started to do a little bit of research and try to figure it out, and I would diet for a little bit and then not, and then I would diet for a little bit and then not, because I just kept going back and forth on that I wasn't big enough, or I wasn't as developed as I needed to be, or whatever it was, whatever excuses I threw at myself. And because I didn't have anything to compare it to, I just believed it, right? So then finally, when I was like 21, it's like, no, I'm gonna do it. So I did a UFE show, Ultimate Fitness Events is the organization, and at the time it was like, so we have the CPA now, but at the time it was the OPA, and from what I had heard, they were kind of like the big leagues, and the UFE was kind of like a better introduction for someone that wanted to compete if they weren't, you know, as experienced and they wanted to get their feet wet and in some place that was maybe not as competitive. So I did that show, and that would have been October of 2015. And that was my first show. I did the fitness model category, and I came second. I did all right. And for my first show, for competing all by myself, doing my prep by myself and that kind of stuff, I did okay, and I went home happy. Had the support from my parents. That trainer, actually, Brad, that I had when I was 16, he actually could make it, so that would have been that would have been like a year or two later, or no, God, what am I talking about? 16, I was 21, I can't do math. That was like 4 or 5 years later. But thankfully for Facebook, we were able to connect, and he could make it, so that was cool. And then at that show, I had met a guy by the name of Adam Wilkes, who was a competitor. He was a bodybuilder, and he was peeled. Not a big guy, but in fantastic shape. And he had said to me, I will be forever grateful for this, because this probably kickstarted like this whole journey for me. He had said, if you could get a little bit leaner, like you've got a good build, like you could probably do bodybuilding. And I was like, you think so? He's like, yeah, like I think you'd do well. So it turned out that 2 weeks later, the NGA, the National Gym Alliance, I think it's another organization primarily out of the States, they were putting a show on in Toronto 2 weeks later from that show I first did, and they had said that anybody that did the UFE show could get like free entry or something like that, or a discounted entry, just to help build the numbers up for the show, since they weren't really from here. They didn't have a big turnout. So I was like, oh, 2 weeks, like I could keep dieting for 2 more weeks, and maybe this is my chance to try out bodybuilding. So I did that, and it wasn't a big show, but I did bodybuilding, and I did men's physique, which was comparable to like the fitness model category that I did at the UFE show, and again did well. I had the support of my family, everything went good, and I was like, okay, like now I'm getting into this, I like this. So then fast forward, so that would have been November. Fast forward to the following April, I had done my first OPA show, because I felt I was ready to go in like the quote unquote big leagues now. I'd hired a coach, Sean, who I've worked with for years now, And we did bodybuilding and men's physique again, and then I did well there, did provincials, did well there, went to nationals, won that, which qualified me for IFBB Worlds, which was in Spain in 2017. Went there, which was amazing. Obviously, you know, it was an untested show, so I didn't have any like illusions of doing well, because I knew I was going to be a natural guy against unnatural athletes, but it was still an experience that I will never forget. I got to travel afterwards, which was great. And here we are, like all these years later, you know, 10 shows. So it's 2020 now, 5 years after my first show, well over 10 years of training now, and I love it. Bodybuilding's my life. I love the whole process of it all. I love the people that I've met, the coaching opportunities that I've had, just the continuation of learning and how the sport is evolving through like diet and training and the science behind it all. And yeah, I'm all in on bodybuilding now, and I wouldn't change a thing, because it's kind of shaped my entire life. It's brought me, you know, in a form or another, to my fiance. It's brought me many good friends and memories and experiences that will forever cherish, and that would have never happened if I hadn't kind of gone into this whole bodybuilding thing. So yeah, I thought that that was a cool story to share, and answering the question of how I got into bodybuilding and what's all come after that. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and like the video. Submit ideas for these quarantine combo videos through Instagram or here on YouTube, and we're gonna do them every day. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.